Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
I love the story of the Trojan horse. If you're not familiar, it was first mentioned in the Odyssey, and it described how Greek soldiers were able to take the city of Troy after what's proclaimed to be a fruitless 10-year siege. They just couldn't get inside the city. They had a huge gate. They just couldn't get in. 10 years. Talk about persistence. What they ultimately did, if you're not familiar, is they built a giant wooden horse and they hid their best warriors inside, and then they went away. And the people at the city of Troy were like, hey, we defeated them. They gave us a parting gift. This is over. Let's take the gift in. And when the horse was inside, then the soldiers came in and took the city. And the Greeks came back. The Greek soldiers came back and took the whole city. So I love that story, and it's not lost on me that certainly people died, but I have a guest today, Ken Rochon, aka Dr. Smiley, and what he does, and we'll talk about all the things that he does. Just reminds me of that story because he gets to meet or gets to connect with lots of really neat people. And before hit record, we were talking about Lewis Howes, somebody we've both had the opportunity to know. Lots and lots of actors and business people and whatnot. And they give him the time of day because he has something to offer them. And I look at it as a Trojan horse. Now, he's not killing people, but anyhow, Ken, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Frank. I've never been described or brought into a show with that particular analogy, so that's pretty neat.
Yeah, you're a Greek soldier in my eyes. Yeah, if you could, I guess, tell our audience, what you do, and you're in publishing. I'll let that out, but you have a unique approach to meeting people.
I think I do. And if it was called the Trojan smile, I don't even know if that'd be the way to describe it. But because Trojan does have that pushback, like certain words like manipulation. And, manipulation is an absolutely beautiful word when it's used correctly. So right. It's behind the intention of the word. And so you're obviously putting the Trojan horse with the intention of love and a smile, and how to break through a barrier that normally would actually stop a lot of people. So I get the reference. So that was very creative. I actually do several things that are, I guess, those barrier blockers and open the doors rather quickly. So number one thing I do is I do photography, and that's not a normal aspect of a publisher or a marketer to be relatively good at using a camera. But I volunteered about a year after my mom passed of Alzheimer's. I bought some really expensive equipment, and for the people that think there's source or God, they can appreciate that that's what I was given in my brain to do, which is go on Amazon and get some really expensive equipment and go have some fun with it and make a difference. So my prayers that led up to it were, hey, I just was a caregiver for my mom for 3 years. I was pulled away from a career being a DJ for 30 some years. I thought that was life, and you just travel and you enjoy life. And it was like the soul had been just completely pulled from under me, and the purpose-driven life was replaced with, okay, find your purpose. And so I didn't know how a camera was going to help me find a purpose, but I did know that that's what I was supposed to do. So being a marketer, I thought, well, the camera is supposed to tell a story. That's what it is. And since I'd gotten a couple art grants to go to college, I knew that my creative side would probably do something unique with the camera, because I didn't know what the heck a camera did, honestly. I just knew it was another paintbrush for me. And I would hit the button for the shutter to open and get the shot and magic happened. I do not know if I was responsible for the pictures I was getting, but they would blow people away. And they'd say, and there's people that use my shots I did 10, 12 years ago still as their Facebook photo or their LinkedIn photo, or just even, I even get calls for people to use it for their obituary or whatever. It's the best shot to have. And I think it's spiritual. I think it's a calling that I was able to get. I was called the person that could capture the spirit.
It's interesting. I don't mean to interrupt you, but it's interesting. I too bought a lot of high-end camera equipment. My kids were in sports; they were playing soccer, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to buy camera equipment. And
right.
I don't know what I ultimately spend. You know, you don't keep track of it. You just, I need this lens. I need this. I need this. And I probably maybe took 250,000 pictures, 3 kids playing soccer all the way through college, club, all, 1,000 shots a game, and you do the math.
Right.
It's a lot. But anyhow, I tell people it was the best investment I ever made, and I never took a dime.
Well, my wife was clear on what we spent. It was 25,000. Okay. 25,000. Well, the thing is, I looked for the best camera, and then I said, well, what if this best camera breaks? I better buy 2 of them. So the body of camera 1 was $10,000. The body of camera 2 was $6,000. So it added up pretty quickly. And then
it does.
And all that stuff. But it wasn't the camera equipment that was doing it, because before my mom passed, I had inferior equipment and I was shooting stuff that was winning awards. So it was the fact that I was being accused that I was using better equipment. I said, you know what, I might as well buy equipment. The worst answer I think a photographer can hear when they see my work is, I don't know what the settings are. They hated hearing that.
Yeah. Well, a camera can open a lot of doors. I mean, with my camera, I would walk into anywhere like I own the place, and
You're right. Are
you with ESPN? I think so.
Well, you have that official look. Well, we went ahead and bought almost SWAT gear. It was all black. It had our emblem of the Umbrella Syndicate, which looks like that. That was on our chest, and that was on our hat. And it looks so official, Frank. I was walking into events I was supposed to be at that I had VIP media clearance, but they never stopped me. I mean, it looked that official. And out of probably 350 events, I was stopped one time. Like, can I see your credentials? So that's how effective the look is, I guess.
Yeah.
And
take it till you make it, right?
Yeah. So that was one approach. The part 2 of that, though, is you meet really amazing people when you have the camera and they let you have full access. So I would take these pictures, and unlike a lot of photographers that are usually classified introvert, they like being behind the scenes, they like being behind the camera, and they kind of stay there themselves. I really like to take the picture and look at it, and they'd see my eye and they go, I say, you want to see it? And they'd say, sure, I'd love to see it. I'd show up and they go, how do I get that photo? Because I knew it was a good photo. And I say, easy, just give me your number. And so the exchange and the building of a Rolodex happened very quickly. And I never missed to use the number. I never spammed them. I never sold the list. I never even marketed to them. I just kept their number so that if I could ever help them again, I had access. Or when I got my radio show, which was, another layer down of the Trojan Smile, that I would call them and say, hey, remember I took that photo of you? Well, I'd love to have you on my show. Or I even ask them, hey, when I send you this photo, I'm on Voice America. Would you like to be on my show? And they said, yeah, sure. It was kind of like, that sounds fair.
Yeah.
And then I think the thing you're referring to is the reason I called you, which is the Keep Smiling podcast book. And although I don't have that specific one handy, I have the other part I was inviting you to, which was the Dose of Hope TED Talk, where you share how you bring smiles to the world.
And we're audio only, so he's showing some stuff and nobody can see it, but that's okay.
And hey, when you're on my show, you'll be able to see Frank.
Okay, there you go.
So yeah, in any of the books that I'm referring to, we can put links and they can be certainly shared with people as well. So those were the 3 mechanisms of the Trojan Smile, I think.
Okay. Now, how has that led to success in Perfect Publishing? It's your publishing arm.
Well, when you meet the biggest people that are really making things happen, a magical thing called social proof happens. And the assumption, which is not a bad assumption, is that, wow, if he's talking to all these people, he's meeting all these people, he's probably playing pretty big. And the fact is you are. And social proof creates a tipping point over time. And so the more people you meet and the more times you run into them, all of a sudden you kind of get accepted as someone that's trusted and someone that can be counted on for whatever their service is. And my service happened to be not just making a book, but having a book impact the world.
Well, here's a question. And maybe it's a two-parter. Well, it is a two-parter. Did you concoct this plan on the front end, or was it just something that happened organically? I'm going to get out, I'm going to do this stuff, and then it sort of took on a life of its own. And if you thought of it on the front end, how? And if you just picked it up on the fly, at what point did you realize, hey, I'm really onto something here? I'm really onto banging these rocks together and it creates fire kind of a thing. I've got something.
I wouldn't say I concocted it, but when the ideas were kind of brought to me, I was putting pieces of the puzzle together saying, this is actually pretty powerful because most people don't know how to use this. So if you are in a disruptive mindset, which a lot of entrepreneurs are, and you're in a disruptive mindset from a bit of an Elon Musk standpoint, like this doesn't make sense the way this is done. For instance, when I started my DJ business, it didn't make sense that DJs were part-time. They didn't have an office and they didn't have to mix and show what they could do to a client. They were all hired over the phone out of the yellow pages. That's how you hired a DJ. And when we did those three things, it just catapulted us into the stratosphere. We became almost $1 million company. We had 45 guys working for us. And it was just because the three USPs, the unique selling propositions, were three things that people just didn't want to invest in, which was full-time and an office that's very expensive, and having clients come in and actually watch you do your thing means you always have to really be able to be flexible. You don't just mix the same thing every single time. Otherwise, clients will be bored. So you have to create something new every time. Well, with the photography, I saw that photographers were not showing photos to people. So there was no engagement there. They weren't turning the photos around in 24 hours. We did it in 12. We had about 35,000 people coming to our Facebook page back in 2009, 2010. And the third thing was we decided we would trade the value of the promotion, the marketing, and the photos instead of accept money. And the reason this is important is because the iPhone coming out in 2000 or whenever it came out really changed the degree of how much something was worth when you were capturing photos. An iPhone. And so the budgets were actually considerably under $500. I'll just put it that way. And that's not really a living for exchanging 4 hours of your time, the 5 hours post-production, the driving, all that stuff. So I came up with our value proposition at right around $5,000. I said, we will promote your event, we'll market your event, we'll market your next event, we'll get the photos up, and we'll get them up very quickly, tagged correctly, social media-wise, so you'll actually grow your event. And this is valuable to the sponsors. This is valuable for people creating a viral campaign. The relevancy was huge. So we were doing, by year 2, $400,000 in trade a year.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a completely different game, and I wasn't necessarily well liked in the photography community.
Get over it. Things change, right? People used to ride on horses. Now they're in cars. I mean, if you're still shoeing horses, get a clue. They're tires now. Go ahead. You were going to say something.
Well, I was just going to say the thing that's funny about it is photographers were my heroes. When I was a DJ, I loved photographers. I loved having lunch with them. They were probably 15 to 20 of them were the ones who referred us, and they didn't care that we were committed to having a one-on-one, because when they would refer us, some of them would say, hey, can you make me exclusive? And I said, well, there's two problems with making you exclusive. One, you do about 40 jobs a year. And they said, yeah, about 42. And I said, we do 1,400. And so to make it exclusive, you couldn't handle it. But also, you're so freaking good, you're not available. I said, what if I give your card with 2 other photographers every time? And that way you're getting referrals that you can take. And so they were open to that. And so I had about 17 to 21 photographers that I would refer, and they filled our plate with probably 300 events a year. And so I love photographers, is my point. And so when I alienated myself from them because I was going into marketing and social media, it really was a heartbreak for me because they were misconstruing that I wanted them to go for the ride too. So it was never a change of position or a change of my passion for what I thought they brought to the table, which is, it's interesting, but a photographer in a weird way does not create anything. they capture what was created.
Yeah.
And so like when I'm a DJ and I'm making the crowd go crazy and they're dancing, they're having the best time ever, the photographer's taking the picture. There's not necessarily credit given to the DJ. It's not like this energy was caused by this DJ. They stamped their watermark on it. And I think that's fair. They captured a moment. They captured something
Yeah.
brilliant. But my only point in that is that's why I love photographers, is they would show that I did something. And
Yeah.
it was my job to get those photos, which is sometimes rather difficult to get my photos back. That was the big thing about the Umbrella Syndicate. This company I referred to in the back, the Umbrella Syndicate. These are 6 companies we actually created. They were all media connected. One was photography, one was production, one was publishing, one was promotion, et cetera. And so we love photographers because I love plugging them into these opportunities, and I wanted them to grow with us.
Well, I mean, back to the photographers, the change was happening.
Right. It was.
You didn't do anything that wasn't going to happen anyway. And
well, the frankly, it was like you talking about Lewis Howe, with him learning about LinkedIn. I was on the cusp. I mean, I really did learn about Facebook before the business world even knew about it. I mean, I learned about it shortly after I left the college scene, and I saw this was going to be massive. And so it was really my job as a marketer. How can I use this? And so photographers, before Facebook came in, there was a very relevant clause they had in their agreements. And that clause was that they had complete control and access of all of the experience. In other words, no one else could come into their space and disrupt the fact that they had to do photos. Do you recall that?
well, I wasn't connected to it like you were or
Okay.
are. Yeah.
Yeah. So if a photographer, it was called exclusive rights.
Okay.
So, and that clause even had a sub clause to it that said, if you have another photographer come into my space that you've contracted me for, I have the right to sue, hold the images, and even walk away, because you have actually disrupted my ability to do my job. That's how strong that clause was. And my issue with it was that when social media and smartphones became so prevalent, that anyone could pull a phone out and capture an image, and they weren't doing anything to take away from the photographer, but they were getting their experience, their social experience, from a media standpoint. They became media people themselves. And before the smartphone, there really wasn't a lot of people carrying cameras around, and if someone did, they knew that they weren't supposed to take it out when there's a photographer there. That's my point.
Yeah, I get it. Well, I have noticed that, when I was taking pictures at soccer games, everybody was like, have at it, Frank, because you're down on the field, and it's not a ton of work, but it's work, right? I mean, you're not enjoying the game. You're looking through a camera.
Right.
But if I would go to a pre-prom gathering where all the people, the guys and girls are there all dolled up, and that, my camera was of less value, because every mom in America, I don't mean to be sexist, but that's just the reality. Guys, just guys weren't as prevalent, is taking pictures with their phones, and those were fine. They didn't need what I was doing. Let's talk about your Smile project, how that got started. I guess describe, you're creating a series of books.
Yeah. So the first thing was that when my mom passed in 2008, I made a promise to her pretty much on her deathbed that I was going to do 2 things. I was going to write my book. I'd promised I was going to write forever. And the second thing I was going to do was to make my life a tribute to her, because she had been a cheerleader to my rebellious and just serial entrepreneur craziness. And so I said, I want to do some good things in the world. So my first thing was to get the cameras. The second thing was to go to women empowerment or women conferences and show the support and really get them out there. And those conferences started really growing, which got me into the White House 4 times.
Wow.
In my first 6 months of being in the Umbrella Syndicate, I had never been in the White House ever in my life. And here I was being invited to White House events. And I was just shrugging and saying, I cannot believe this. This is exactly what the power of this is. And they didn't want a photographer out there at the White House event. I mean, they wanted a photographer, but what they really wanted was they wanted publicity, is my point. Yeah. And so they said, can you be at the White House in a couple of days or next week or something? We're getting awarded for, and one of them, the first one was very special. It was it was a women veteran organization that was addressing the amount of homeless female veterans coming back from Afghanistan. They were living in their cars with their children, and it was an atrocious situation. So I had the opportunity to be part of their voice, and I got a photograph of Michelle Obama at the White House that day, and my camera had a really loud click. It was that big monstrous camera, and it would click. Yeah. And I said, "Oh shoot, I don't know how to silence this thing." And so she heard the click, and I was trying to get her attention. The click certainly did it. So she looked over to me and she smiled, and I got the shot. And then she kept talking. So the click actually worked to my benefit. But the story is that I didn't know what I was doing to find my purpose. I just knew that I was supposed to use a camera to find it, and it was. I don't know if you ever heard an organization called CEO Space. Mm-hmm. Bernie Dorman created CEO Space. His dad, back in the day, was friends with, all the people that were moving and shaking the world. I mean, Zig Ziglar would come over to his house, Jim Rohn, all the big people. Les Brown would just come over to his house. And so Bernie says, you know what? I want to create a CEO space. I want to create a space for CEOs to network and think tank and figure out how they're going to fundraise and get monies to get their dreams to happen. Well, I went one time, and it was a good experience, but my camera got me in the second time, the third time, the fourth time, and on. And so every time I went, I said, wow, this camera is helping me save money going to events. And so it wasn't just that I could trade. It was that what would normally cost, something like, I will honestly say, about $40,000 to $50,000 a year to go to big events, I was able to go. Just trade. I traded. Yeah. And so I still had to pay for my flights, and I usually didn't have to pay for my hotel. But my point is, had I not had that kind of deal, I couldn't have gone to CEO Space 13 times. And it did take 13 times, because on the 13th time, a gentleman, I know that your audience can't see this, but it's a Keep Smiling card. He handed me a Keep Smiling card, and I looked at it, and it was as if I was reliving the John Belushi moment where he looks at the stained glass and the light goes through the church, and he says, I see the light, I see the light. So 7 years, I did not know what my purpose was. But then that day, it was very clear to me. And that night, I could not sleep. I said, I am actually supposed to capture smiles and celebrate leaders, honor leaders that are inspiring hope and creating community in the world. And I thought, this is as close to Gandhi as I'm ever going to get. So Gandhi wanted peace in the world. And if you can imagine that pieces could actually be measured by smiles. There's a country called Bhutan, and they measure their gross national product as their happiness index.
Yeah.
And so with me doing this, I did my doctorate work on actually that exact thing. What is your SPH? What are your smiles per hour? And I had already done almost 300 of these Keep Smiling books, and they're every kind of book. And if I didn't do every kind of book, we wouldn't be talking today. Because when I did the podcaster book, I met our mutual friend, Mr. Fritz. And
who connected us, right?
Yeah, and I'm a very big proponent. In fact, I would have normally put that at the beginning of the show for me, so I'll certainly put that at the beginning of the show when you're on my show. But if you don't have a connector, you don't have a relationship builder. And so, and a connector is so special in so many ways. They're taking tens of thousands of hours of work, and they're saying, you know what? I know the ingredient that's going to change your life. It's this person. There's a quote by Charlie Tremendous Jones that goes like this: the difference between where you are today and where you'll be in 5 years is the people you meet and the books you read. So I met Barry Shore, and Barry Shore handed me this card, and he basically adopted me. He's my mentor. He is an older Orthodox Jewish man who has something called the Daily Smile. He has probably about 40 different expressions, maybe even 50 different expressions on cards. But he handed me this Keep Smiling card, and all these other expressions I just didn't really care about. This one took off like a rocket because I got behind it. I marketed it everywhere. And it got so big that people thought this was my idea. And I said, no, this is not my idea. I am the engine and I am the creator of the movement. But the person who gave this to me is Barry Shore. When Barry Shore started getting all these awards for being, this philanthropic and this amazing person, he would call me after the award and he'd say, everyone thinks that this is your card. and so we finally agreed that it was our card together. And so someone gave him the card when he was actually in the hospital, and he started giving it to the nurses, and he saw the care was just so much better. They really focused on spending more time with him, and he healed quicker and he got well quicker. And part of that was the smiles he was giving himself, but it was also that he was giving them smiles that gave him more energy. But it's an interesting thing that happens when you smile. When you're smiling at a very high frequency, and it's obviously genuine, you're building up a lot of dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, which are your happy chemicals that keep you really well. And when you are the opposite of smile, which is stress or anxiety, you are building the antithesis, which would be cortisol, and you are doing slow death. I mean, you're hurting your cells. You're not doing good things for your body. So we came up with Dose of Hope during the pandemic, and you were invited to this. It's a TED Talk about how you create who you are and how you created who you are, not just how you create who you are, how you created who you are. Because how you create who you are is how much you love yourself and how much you're willing to invest in yourself to make a difference in the world. So when you create a who that you love and that you're proud of, you typically give yourself a present. It's called a purpose. And that purpose, as big as your who is usually very symbolic of what your purpose will be. And then that, obviously, as big as your purpose is as big as your impact will be. So they have a very high connectivity to it.
This is great. Let's shift gears here as we kind of wind up. People listening, how can they help you? How can they get a hold of you? I guess those are my two questions, my two parting shots.
Okay, well, one way is I actually give my cell phone, and so I have a cell phone. It's 202-701-0911. And then I have an email, bookdr.smiley, dr.smiley @gmail.com. And of course, if they go to Facebook or they go to Perfect Publishing, we'd love to hear from them. But how they can either help themselves or help me is I love meeting people that really are hungry to make a difference in the world. And I love meeting those people because I don't have to wonder, is this the person I want to amplify? And is this the person I want to go on a 2-year tour to show their book off to the world? So I love people that have an idea that want to impact the world, usually in the style of a book. And then what I do is I say, hey, let's go to the Jumbotrons in Times Square. Let's go to the Library of Congress. What cities do you want to go to around the United States? And I do a Malcolm Gladwell tipping point type campaign. If you have your book being seen by 50 different cities, chances are very high you're going to become more popular.
Yeah, that's true. I really appreciate your time today. This has been great. I'm going to hop on your podcast at some point shortly here.
Yes.
But I do appreciate the time.
My pleasure. My pleasure. We are now friends.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AMSPIRIT.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.